You're watching World Championship Wreckage, brought to you by Rivet City Radio and the World Championship Wreckage YouTube page. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Today's episode, Curt Hennig in WCW, and we found out why he couldn't use the name Mr. Perfect.
By the way, checkmate.
So at initial glance, it does look like we have a checkmate. Look at where the king could go, and look at how the king could be attacked in all those positions. But white still has one more move, and look, the knight could move here. The queen has two moves. So yes, Mr. Perfect is indeed not perfect.
Oh, Jay.
Wow.
So that went over my head because I have no idea how we play chess. I know how to play checkers, but I have no idea about chess. But anyway, welcome everybody to another episode of World Championship Wreckage. As always, I am your friendly neighborhood DadHat wearing wrestling fan, joined as always by my buddy from Bot Spots and Chair Shots over on Rivet City Radio, the Will Gray.
Gentlemen.
And joined with us in the guest chair today, somebody that we've been trying to get on for 8 different episodes now at this point. It finally happened. Tyler.Wrestles. If you don't know Tyler, follow him on TikTok. We'll give him a chance to shout out all of his stuff at the end of the show. But Tyler, thanks for joining us, man.
No, I'm glad I could finally make it. Glad I could finally make it. I mean, like I said, I'm a little under the weather, but I was going to make it today.
Yeah. Well, we get to talk about somebody that I'm a big fan of. I was in WWF. I was in WCW, but I'll save this to the end. Something, Will, that has never happened from us doing this show has happened by doing a research. And I'll get into that at the very end. So let's start off. So Curt Hennig, second generation wrestler. His father wrestled, and then we all know that he has a son, Curtis Axel, who is still in the damn Royal Rumble at this point. He's never been eliminated, but but I mean, of that family and everything, Curt had probably the most well-known kind of run. His son, had some spots here and there, but now he's backstage with WWE, not really active. His dad, Curt just happened to be in that big time frame of the Attitude Era where, he was pre-Attitude Era WWF. He was in Attitude Era during WCW. So, I mean, he was just at the right time for anyone in that family. But we're talking about just him in WCW. So we're past WWF. We're past classic matches with Bret Hart. We're past, being a commentator in WWF. Well, he debuts at the very end of a Nitro just by walking out in a suit, just by walking out. We are in the middle of the Outsiders, Hall and Nash, and Randy Savage destroying Diamond Dallas Page, like elbow drop after elbow drop by Savage, Outsiders Edge, and power bombs from Nash, and they're building towards Bash at the Beach 97, where there's going to be Hall and Savage against DDP and a mystery opponent. Well, and they're playing up who could this mystery opponent be? Well, at the same time, Raven hops the guardrail, and everybody thinks that it might be Raven because he's new to the company. And then all of a sudden, walking down the ramp from backstage in a powder blue suit that only Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig could pull off. Here he comes. And the commentators are losing their ever-loving mind about Curt Hennig being in WCW. It was weird. I remember this, rewatching it. It was kind of out of left field and everything. Because it was just we have a big debut, but he didn't really do anything. He just kind of, I'm walking to the ring, and the last thing you see is him standing on the steps. Not sure where his allegiance is, but Will, Tyler, whoever wants to go first, what are your first memories of Curt Hennig in WCW?
Tyler, you can lead off always.
Basically, like you said, when he just walked down the aisle in the suits, because, I mean, for one, he was Mr. Perfect, but he wasn't Mr. Perfect anymore because he couldn't use that name.
Yeah.
But it was a shock. It was a surprise, especially as a teenage boy. It's like, oh yeah, another one came to WCW, and that's like, I mean, that was always exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a huge deal. But yeah, I remember him and the whole, like you were explaining, the whole DDP thing, the mystery partner, and then what that leads to next. Basically, that's kind of my most fond memories, or my most burned in memories of Curt Hennig as far as when he came to WCW.
WCW has and I'll say the same issue, but it's not really an issue that AEW has now in 2023, in a sense that anytime somebody shows up, it feels like they're always just a WWE guy. You know what I mean? Like, seldom does somebody show up on another network that it's not a WWE guy. And WCW felt a lot of that in the 90s. And Curt Hennig was one of those guys that he was always right there. He's like always the bridesmaid, but never the bride. You know, like he was always right there, but he never got pushed over that edge.
Yeah. I mean, so many people say that Curt Hennig is on the list of some of like their top, who haven't won a world title. Like he's definitely usually in the conversation. So we get to Bash of the Beach. It's tag team match. It's weird because it's Hall and Savage instead of Hall and Nash, and it's DDP, and Bobby the Brain is going, I think it's Raven. I think it's going to be Raven, and out comes Curt Hennig. There's a lot of history in this match for Curt. You've got Curt and Scott Hall on the other side of the ring from him. They have a history from the AWA back in the day. Savage and Curt and WWF, both at one point commentators. They had matches together in WWF. And of course, there's history with DDP with the Diamond Stud with Scott Hall in this match. So it's a cool little way to start off. Because I mean, if you know the business or you're watching it for the first time, you're like, there's a lot of backstory here that insiders would know, and if you didn't, you're not missing anything. But it's just kind of cool to kind of see that all wrapped together. It's a good tag match. I'm not gonna say it's a bad tag match, but we go into Curt. I mean, coming out with DDP as a face, and then what's he do? Turns heel. DDP like pulls the rope slightly, which makes Curt kind of jerk and everything, and Curt rolls out and then just attacks DDP, throws him back in the ring for Hall and Savage to have their way with him and everything. And then, I mean, the way that I think Curt Hennig should always be a heel. There are some people that like Rey Mysterio will always be a face. Curt Hennig should always be a heel. Agree or disagree, gentlemen?
I agree, 100%.
Completely agree.
Yeah, I think he's at his best, promo wise, work wise, when he is being that heel. The dude can bump and feed like no one else.
No.
Like this is coming from someone who has never stepped foot in a wrestling ring, but just watching it and knowing the terms bump and feed and hearing what people say a good example of it would be. I would throw Curt in that scenario. So Curt, for the first 2 months, he has some noticeable matches in WCW. He's facing the likes of Mortis, aka Canyon, DDP, Wrath, the Giant. But soon kind of finds himself. We get a weird kind of transition again. We get a transition where he, the Horsemen have always kind of been, the cool bad guys. Like they're like the original cool bad guy faction or group, I should say. And he finds himself tagging with Ric Flair. So I mean, we get to Clash of the Champions 35, August 21st of 97, and it's Flair and Curt Hennig, and they defeat Conan and Six. I like I mean, I remember this, and I remember liking the idea of Kurt and Flair being together. Um, it was almost, at least what I thought back in the day, it was like almost a passing of the torch kind of moment. It seemed like, because like as good as Flair was, I really thought that Kurt was just as good in the ring um, back in the day. But of course, after this tag match, it leads into the one of the most historic and somewhat controversial storylines in WCW, at least during the Attitude Era. Um, this is the classic Arn Anderson giving his spot, to Curt Hennig. And then, we get the wonderful parody from the NWO, which will set up War Games in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Always going to plug my North Carolina stuff because WCW was here a lot. But that parody from the NWO and Kevin Nash with the beer cooler and the my spot, not your spot, my spot, liver spot, like my spot, like all that. Like it's great. Six with the flare nose, Bagwell with the ponytail, like Kurt, Conan as Mongo. Like it's perfect. And like we see this later on in WWF, from DX, parodying the Nation, and then there's other parodies later on in WWF. But for you two, like, what were your thoughts with this? Because like this is going into War Games, which is a big time deal in WCW history. War Games is one of the best known things WCW in it. I mean, to this day, WWE is doing War Games still because it was so well known. But look at the crew. We've got the Horsemen, who, yes, we're established and everything, but it's the newer Horsemen. It's Flair, it's Mongo, it's Benoit, and now Kurt. What are y'all's thoughts on the promo, the parody promo? And then also for the NWO side of things, it's not your big names. You've got Kevin Nash, but it's Nash, Six, Conan, Bagwell. It's almost like not the B team, but it's the A minus team of the NWO. What are your thoughts on this as we head into War Games '97?
I guess I remember thinking back, like you just brought up, I kind of thought the NWO was outmatched in this because, for one, I thought Kurt was the perfect guy to come to the Horsemen at the time because he kind of had the style, he had the look. I mean, he looked like a horseman. Let me put it that way. And yeah, the whole parody and stuff at the time, I mean, I was a teenager. I didn't think much of it, but I mean, now I kind of look back at it and it might have been a little too personal for some stuff, but
I mean, Arn Anderson has said it on his own podcast how his wife was so pissed at that because she was like, it makes you look like you're a drunk.
Yeah.
Well, you do like to drink, Arn.
In a lot of ways, I think it's the new school versus old school. They brought in so many of these old AWA, JCP guys to represent the Horseman side of it. And then directly across the ring was the NWO and everything that happened in that 97, 98 push leading up to the almost brand split. Like it was very much that new school versus old school heading into this War Games. And, Hennig was that bridge between the two. He wasn't exactly a Flair or a Steamboat or a Wahoo McDaniels, but he wasn't, a Six or a Nash or anything. He was that in-between generation.
He was, late. I mean, he was there for some of the late 80s, tail end Hogan 80s Mania, but was really a forefront of like pre-new generation into new generation WWF. 97 War Games is one of my favorites, but it's also super short. It's like I can put that in and like by the time it's done, I'm like, should the War Games match just have a little bit more to it?
It's got to be one of the fastest ones.
It's fast. It's super fast and everything. And I mean, I can like just sitting here thinking about it, I can see the turn from Kurt coming out with the sling, pulling out the handcuffs, making you think that he's gonna, attack the NWO and turns on the Horsemen, and then the slam of the cage door onto Flair's head, and the sound of Flair. Like I can hear it sitting here right now talking to you two. At this moment, Curt's been in WCW, not even a year and everything, and this is the start kind of the NWO, getting oversaturated with so many people. Is this the best decision for Curt at this point? And if it's not, what else would you do with him in WCW at this point?
I guess for me, at this point, I think he would be okay, but they continue to keep adding and adding and adding and adding, and then that kind of buries his importance, I guess, in the NWO, in my opinion. As far as what he'd do if he did, I mean, obviously he could have stayed a Horseman, and they could have fought the NWO a lot longer than they did. But I mean, that had obviously more to do with Flair stuff than just Curt Hennig. So
yeah,
because he was going to be away for a while.
I think this is a precursor to what happened with Brett in '98 when he came over too, because you saw how mismanaged Curt was when he first came over. And it wasn't, I don't want to say mismanaged, but it was one of those, he didn't have a clear, precise direction. And he was one of those guys that seemed like he could be promised the moon and carry the whole company on his back, but they didn't know, which direction to put him in. And we saw the same thing happen with Bret Hart. Bret Hart's first interaction in the company was as a freaking ref, So like looking at what Curt had to deal with too, he came in and he was kind of, like I said, mismanaged might not be the best term for it, but there's a correlation throughout his career where, like I said before, he's always this close to being the guy. He just never gets to be the guy. He never gets that chance.
Yeah. It almost feels like, kind of going off what you're saying, in WCW, he didn't know who he was. He's not Mr. Perfect anymore.
Yeah.
He's doing a lot of the same mannerisms and everything, but it's like he didn't know who his identity was. He didn't know who Curt Hennig was. He knew who Mr. Perfect was in WWF, but who is Curt Hennig? What is Curt Hennig going to do? Like he seemed like just a lost little sheep among, a flock. I think that if I liked him, and I like the idea of him as a Horseman. As you mentioned, kind of bridging that gap, even in the Horsemen, he kind of did. You had newer members like Mongo and Benoit that were
Malenko, some of these guys,
that were younger. But then you had a Flair who, is the veteran and everything. And you had, if you kept Curt there, it would have been a perfect kind of like in between, like if Flair's not there, okay, almost like a second in command. I think it was just like how Arn giving his spot. I thought it would have been a perfect thing. But that doesn't happen. Turns, joins the NWO. And as we said, one of the quickest War Games matches ever. And then the night after War Games, which I did not remember this happening the very next night, but in my research and going back and looking at the very night after War Games, he defeats Mongo McMichael to win his first title in WCW, and it's the U.S. title. I think, and this is pun intended, the perfect title for Curt Hennig to have.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think, like we talked about it last week. Will I always thought the TV title was kind of like that workhorse championship, but the U.S. title really was that second title below the World Championship in WCW. And I mean, why not give him that and everything? If we're not going to put Curt Hennig coming in, who was a main eventer in WWF, you're not going to put him in the main event picture here. Give him the second ranking title in the company. Does it seem too soon?
I think it was a good time, honestly. Yeah, because he's a guy who, like you said, he seems like a perfect fit. Guy who could actually work the ring. Would make others look good too. So that was a good time for him.
I know Will loves his U.S. title.
I love any well-fought mid-card title forever and ever and ever. Amen. My favorite belt of all time, not the 10 pounds of gold, is the IC championship. And in WCW, that's what the U.S. title was. It came up from the NWA and Crockett as being kind of that number 2 workhorse title. If you look at, I know we got to keep our WCW hat on, but if you look at the early 90s and 91 for the IC title, Curt Hennig and Bret Hart at SummerSlam had arguably
one of the best matches ever.
One of the best matches ever.
Yeah.
And that says what he could do with that mid-card workhorse title. And when you look at him in WCW with this belt, he was able to defend it against a Malenko or against a Flair or a Jeff Jarrett, a Giant. He went against everybody in that
You have my
company.
notes in front of you because that's literally my next thing.
Yeah.
I mean, great minds think alike. And then, every now and then ours do.
Ooh. I'm never going to claim mine works. I'm about to say, me, I got 2 kids. My brain is goo most of the time. But yeah, I mean, big names that you look back on it, maybe not at the moment, but looking back on it, the names that he successfully defended that against, the Jarrett you mentioned, Mongo, DDP, Malenko, Flair, even Booker T, big names for a mid-card title, and all of the people that he's competing against move into that main event picture, whether it's here or even the Malenko, when him and the Radicals came over to WWF, they were a main event storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not for a title, but they were in the main event picture because of how big that storyline was. But I mean, these people that he defended against and everything, and it's one of those, like, you look at this list of who he defended this belt against. I'm like, imagine if he was in his heyday defending against these people. They would have been amazing matches, just amazing. So Starrcade 97, we get to the end of his debut year in WCW. And it's funny because I've always been a fan of this match. And I recently saw an interview that Conrad Thompson from an episode with Eric Bischoff on 83 Weeks. And they both kind of trashed this match just a little bit. Maybe not trash, that's not the best word, but just said it wasn't the best match, for these two competitors. And I've always been a fan of it. It's a quick match. It's like 11 minutes long and everything, but DDP is so over with the crowd, and the crowd wants him to get the belt at this point. And Curt just does a good job bumping and feeding and being that heel and helping DDP grow within a match. And I mean, I thought it was great. And I think I like the tie-in that, DDP gets his first big title run in WCW, and it ties in all the way to the debut match of Curt Hennig. So, I mean, you get a nice tie up to a storyline that goes all the way from the summer to the end of the year. What are your thoughts? DDP, the right person for Curt to drop that belt to, or would you think Curt should have held that just a little bit longer, guys?
I think at that time, like you said, he was so over. I mean, I don't think there would have been anybody else that would even been. I don't think there was anybody else that was right for that at that time, because DDP was on fire. I mean, everybody he wrestled with and everybody he touched was gold.
1000% agree. There wasn't anybody that was a bigger star than he was that wasn't named Hogan, Nash, or Hall, really, outside of the NWO. Like, he was definitely the biggest baby face in the company. He was, for all intents and purposes, the face of WCW outside the NWO brand. If you take away the Stings at this point and the Flairs, like that next new generation of WCW stars, Page was the guy. So coming through, Curt is that workhorse mid-card champion, but this was the point to put that title. This was Austin's IC title reign. This was The Rock's IC title reign coming out of the Nation of Domination. That's what this was for Diamond Dallas Page. Getting this title now was what led to him being a 3-time WCW champion later. Yeah.
I have always said that at this time, like, you had Sting, who is babyface technically, in Crow form, but he wasn't talking. DDP was that just as big baby face, but you got him on the mic. You got more character development than, two totally different characters, but you had these two top baby faces one that was, you get, like I said, you get both sides of the plate. You get the talker and you get the brooding thing, and two totally different, but the two top baby faces on your roster at that time. And so we continue on. We start going into 1998. But before we get to 98, in 97, a person shows up in WCW that in 1 week is on WCW, WWF, and ECW all in the same week. Two of them in the same night. And that would be Ravishing Rick Rude, who makes his return back to WCW. I was always a fan of Rude with Curt. I don't know why. I can't even really put it into words and everything. But to me, we're probably gonna. We could have done a drinking game with this episode. How many times are we gonna say perfect? But it really was Rick with Curt. To me, was just perfect, and I liked Rick in this kind of manager. So I don't even know I would call him a manager. It's like how Heyman is. He was like an advocate. Like he was there, but he was, he's a worker. He's not just a manager. He's been a world champion. He's been all over the place. Like it felt different. And I think it's the reason maybe this is the reason I liked it so much was like when he interjected himself into a match to help Curt, it meant more because if he needed to, he can back up anything that like he could literally jump in there and destroy the guy and leave him to lay for Curt. Maybe that's why I liked him. It was a different type of manager or advocate, maybe if the best way to say it. But thoughts on Rick Rude at this point in his career in WCW and being with Curt Hennig?
I'm like you. I mean, him and Curt were perfect together, in my opinion. Rick worked at first, but then I think he kind of tailed off, in my opinion. I mean, he just didn't fit with what was going on at that time, and obviously, which you're probably going to talk about here, Curt getting hurt didn't help anything. So,
I think Rick's biggest thing was he was a WWE superstar, and I use this analogy a lot, DadHat. And you've heard me say it. There's a huge difference between a WWE superstar and a pro wrestler. There's just something about them when you're built for that system and that character work that WWE requires. When you go to another system, you might not be able to work as well. And I think Rick Rude was one of those guys. Looking all the way up until the time he passed, though, him and Curt were best friends in real life. They had a great relationship, everything that went to it. Hennig even went as far as to be upset with the lack of talent that turned out for his funeral from WCW. Because he was like, he's one of the boys from the locker room. He was very vocal about it. I think them pairing them together on TV in the short time they were was a perfect match because they had so much chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, if you're looking at Rick Rude in WCW, I totally get and agree with what you're saying. He was a WWF superstar. Other than he worked perfectly for the Dangerous Alliance. And me and you, we gush. I feel like every week we gush over the Dangerous Alliance.
I agree.
But that was the perfect time for Rick and had the right people around him. Rick Rude is one of those, like, if he was still alive, would love to see who you could put him with now to be a manager, an advocate, put him under the learning tree, so many people. Person that I think would be great with Rick Rude, Grayson Waller. Put him with Grayson Waller. I think that would be a cool kind of combo. It would change, or an Austin Theory.
Austin Theory was the first person to mind for me.
Definitely Theory.
But I liked Curt and Rick together. It just felt right, and it's one of those things you hear about all the time in podcasts or interviews or anything, and the Click says it all the time that the reason that their matches were so much fun and so good was because you're working with your friends. And I can attest to that. If you're working with your friends, like if I do a play and I'm on stage with one of my closest friends, we're going to have fun because it's your friend and you're doing what you love. Like it's great. So, I mean, I think that's why it resonated, I think, with so many fans and they liked them together was that just, it bled through to your television. So we're moving on into 98. Like I said, 98, Kurt's just kind of, he's a workhorse for the NWO. He's got matches, he's got main events on Nitro, but he's still just a member of the NWO and an oversaturated NWO. There were so many people in the NWO that, like, I was very high on. But during this time, you're just like, okay, they're a member of the NWO. Like,
Yeah.
they're there. They're gonna, okay, you're gonna see them. If they're gonna jump somebody, all 80 of them are gonna run out to the ring. You know, Sting's gonna clear house. It's just what happened with them. But in 98, you know, there's some changes going on, but do you think with the mud, we talked about it, like what else would he done before he joined the NWO? Would he stay to horseman? But like at this point with that oversaturation, don't you think like this would have been just the perfect time to say, like, maybe, I mean, let's have someone defect from the NWO and maybe, okay, even if they're not going to put him against like a Hogan, because, you know, Savage kind of defected and had the cage match at Uncensored 98
Yeah.
and everything. But like, why couldn't Kurt be somebody that maybe defected, but then you get some really good matches and he's being put up against some of those other better members of the NWO, like the mid card. Like, why can't that happen? Like, to me, am I digging too much into it? Am I putting too much? Am I poking the bear just a little bit too much, or is it just WCW just didn't know what to do with him at this point, just like so many of the other NWO members?
I think what you said in the latter is more accurate, but I like your idea if they would have defected him from the NWO, and yeah, it would have made things more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, because he could have definitely elevated some of the NWO members that basically didn't do anything other than come out and beat people up.
Yeah. They had Thursday Thunder. They literally had a show that was set up to put over like good, hardworking professional wrestling. You know, they say, I've been saying it a lot recently. Somebody said it and it makes complete sense to me. They say Memphis always gets over. And that's what Thunder was. It was the old school wrestling show. They had a show that was built for Kurt, but they tied him into this NWO, and it was this prolonged story of when is a good time to pull the trigger and get him out. And it was just like, nope. And then this happened, and then this happened, and then the Wolfpack happened, and then it was which side of NWO is he going to be on? And there was always something happening in the NWO that prevented him from just being able to be a traditional wrestler.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. It's which is a shame. I feel at this point you're just kind of with Kurt. You're just kind of going through the motions. He's there. He's going to put on a match. You're going to see him. He's on TV. Doesn't mean much. But you mentioned the Wolfpack. Yeah, the 98 starts. You know, we start getting that little bit of dissension in the NWO, mainly from the higher ups, the Nashes, the Savages. I can't really say higher up, but you know, he was there. He became a bigger star than a lot of the ones that got kind of left into the dust. But the Conans, and Curt Hennig and Rick Rude show up and they join the Wolfpack, which was interesting because again, I was like, okay, we're gonna showcase Rick Rude and Curt Hennig here. Like, this is a good point. If you're gonna have a dissension group and everything, and at this point it was 5 members, including Rick Rude. Like, yeah, put some people in there that can work and put some legitimacy to it. But just like Tyler mentioned, injuries happen. Kurt gets injured. What do? They have him turn on Conan and go right back into the giant swimming pool of the oversaturated New World Order Hollywood. Let's say the injury doesn't happen, guys. Would staying in the Wolfpack, would that have featured Kurt more? Would that have been a better fit for him?
I think Kurt fit. Rick Rude sometimes he kind of seemed like, because I mean, the Wolfpack was over. I mean, basically they're baby faces, but Rick Rude would still be in the everybody shut up, everybody. I mean, he'd be cutting his heel promos and stuff, and it just wasn't what was going on with the group at that time, in my opinion. But I think, yeah, if Curt wouldn't have got injured, I think he definitely could have stayed in that and made it a lot better than it ended up being, and have a much more successful run than going back and getting lost in the NWO again.
He was a good mouthpiece for that period of the Wolfpack. There wasn't a ton of guys that were, Nash wasn't a bad talker, but
He's
like
not the best.
yeah. So it gave them somebody that
he's rinse, recycle, repeat on promos.
Yeah,
Wolfpack in the house, like big, sexy. Yeah,
He's got his one-liners.
Yeah, he's gonna hit his things, then hit his bullet points, and then pass the mic.
Bingo. And then you had somebody that could get in there and really like preach a manifesto of what the red and black wanted. And there were a handful of them that could do it at that point. But oversaturation is the key term here, because that's what it was. Like by this point, and you think we're only 2 years removed from Hogan turning. And at this point, we went from 3 guys to 5 guys. And now it's like 637 guys, and we've got the NWO like red and green in San Antonio. Like, who the fuck knows what's going on? There's so many different versions of this group, and it doesn't even get as bad as when it gets to black and silver. We'll get there, but it feels like they add.
I like black and silver. Let's say black and red, or white and red when after Finger Poke of Doom. Black and silver was not that bad.
No, I didn't care much for that incarnation of Jeff Jarrett, but we'll get there. I digress.
I love Jeff Jarrett.
But looking at like that was the thing. I feel like they went to the well one too many times. They tried real hard to keep it fresh, and I feel like that was eventually their downfall. And Curt was just an innocent bystander in all of that, because they had so much invested in the NWO stories that he was too big of a star to try to put somewhere else, because everybody was involved with NWO stories.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but I mean, oversaturation. It's the same thing that AEW is dealing with right now. Like, there's so much talent. And that's the same thing that was going on with the NWO and WCW. They had so much talent. WCW at the time, though, which AEW now is being able to do it because they have Ring of Honor, but WCW, they could send people to New Japan. Like, they had that partnership, so it helped to utilize their talent in a way and continue storylines. But, yeah, the oversaturation, and it just hurt. I think being a part of the oversaturated NWO at that point probably hurt Curt's career more than the injury and being out of the ring.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. But he deals with an injury, he gets over it and everything, but we are now a year removed from his debut in WCW. So Bash at the Beach 97, he debuts, tags with DDP against Hall and Savage. A year later, he gets his first chance at the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Unfortunately for him, though, he's going up at the time against the Monster, the Machine, who is going to destroy everyone, Bill Goldberg. It's a shame. It really is a shame that he finally gets a world title shot, and all he gets to do is literally get mowed over.
Yeah.
2 nights in a row.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
2 nights in a row he had to lay down for Goldberg and take that pin. Let me ask you guys a question. In reality here, do you count the AWA heavyweight title as a major world title? Was Vern Gagne's belt big enough to be considered in the territories a major title? Would you count the Mid-Atlantic heavyweight title to be a major title? It's not a WWE title. It wasn't the 10 pounds of gold.
AWA maybe, because that was a big organization.
Yeah, I'd say borderline. I mean, it was like one of the bigger territories.
Because he won an AWA world title, and I hear a lot of people. I put him as one of the top people to never win the big one. But I had a conversation with somebody very respectable inside the NWA, and they told me that he won the AWA title, and they said that was a big one. They were like, winning Vern Gagne's belt wasn't a like, just another territory title. Like for Vern Gagne to go, "You're my guy," and put the belt on you meant something. So I was just out of curiosity, since we were talking about him, if you thought
I
the
would put for
AWA
AWA.
title,
I would, yeah.
you would
Yeah,
think
'cause-
it would be a bigger one.
I think it would count because, like you said, I've seen other people comment on this that were in the AWA and other things, and yeah, Vern didn't. You had to really win Vern over in order to get a title on you.
For sure.
I think it's just like the AWA. We're also so far removed from territory wrestling that, I mean, Will, you and I are the same age. We just know territory wrestling.
We're not old enough to remember territory
Yeah.
wrestling.
So I think now, like, they just don't think about it. But
How
when
old
they
are
look,
you guys?
I'll be 38 in a couple months.
Okay, I'm a year older than you.
Yeah. So like, yeah, but I mean, we don't remember territory days.
Not
Really. I mean, I remember Jim Crockett Promotions, but that's because, I mean, I'm in freaking Charlotte, North Carolina. So
I remember some AWA stuff because I'm like literally 30 miles from Minnesota, and they used to replay it on local channels all the time.
But I mean, it wasn't something that was like, I didn't grow up in the territories. I just went back and watched stuff. But if you're talking about old territories, AWA was up there. It's just, to me, I always think of the big ones as WWF at the time, WCW, aka Jim Crockett Promotions, and probably Jim Crockett because they were like the last one. Like they were the holdout. Like they lasted till the very end, and then they transitioned into WCW. And
they were the saving grace in so many ways for so many of those southeastern territories, especially Georgia, Florida, Texas. Like if it wasn't for Jim Crockett, a lot of those guys would have floundered. He was going in and picking guys up and hiring talent to continue to run in markets where Jim Crockett Promotions would have multiple shows running on the same day in different markets, just because he would buy out the territories just to keep independent wrestling going. Like in a lot of ways, Crockett was both the person who put the knife in independent wrestling's back by selling off to McMahon, but he was also in the same regards the saving grace because he bought it all back.
Yeah.
Like it's such a weird, it's just the Crockett Promotion is such a weird fucking story, dude.
It is. And believe me, you mentioned, the funny thing is, like, I have some family friends that are older and everything who are not wrestling fans, but you mentioned Crockett and they're like, "Oh, I know that name. That's the wrestling family."
Yeah.
Like that's they did wrestling. And I'm like, okay, then that's just how well that family name is down in the Carolinas. But yeah, no, I would put the AWA up there. I would put that and everything. But I agree with you. Like he did. It's a big one, but it's not the
big one.
Big one.
Correct.
Like
yeah.
The big one. I think everyone will agree. That's the WWF Championship. Close second, WCW at this time, at least, because they were beating WWF at this time. But yeah, I would hold it. But the thing was, at that time, anything that like Curt did in the past, it was never referenced. It was never said, oh, he's a former AWA World Heavyweight Championship. He was an AWA World Tag Champion, or whatever other accomplishments he had. Like, unless it was something like with New Japan, because of the partnership, that was the only thing that was ever really mentioned in WCW. Like you go back and watch old WCW, you see the IWGP championships, you hear them say the IWGP championships, but it's just they don't mention the past. And so I think that's another reason why people, if they're not going to watch those territories, they're watching old school WCW and WWE, WWF, whatever you want to say. Like, it's not brought up, so no one really, unless they're just doing research, they're not going to realize that he was a world champion just for the AWA. But anyway, so we lose to Goldberg a year later from his debut. Like I said, late 98, he's out. And by the end of the year, he's back for Starrcade 98. This time coming back, Rick Rude is gone by this point. So it was a short run, about a year for Rude. But 99, I remember this because I got to order it, because I didn't get to order a lot of pay-per-views. But I was so enthralled at the beginning of 99 that they were having and Will knows this, I am a huge fan of tag team wrestling. I love tag team wrestling. And they were having a tag team championship tournament to crown new champions. And we get to 99, and Curt Hennig starts tagging with Barry Windham. And I love this combination. I thought this combination was the perfect, like, old school into the new school. They knew how to work the new school audience, but also knew how to tie in old school stuff to make the audience, remember how back in the day, how a headlock and an arm bar could tell a story. Like, I just thought this was a perfect tag team. What did you guys think of Barry Windham tagging up with Curt Hennig in 99?
I loved it. I mean, like you kind of said, it brings the old school and the new school together. And I remember some of like Barry back in the 80s, and honestly, he's probably one of the most underrated people in wrestling as far as his ability and everything. Just bad timing of stuff. But I absolutely loved it. It was probably one of the things that, as we keep going into the demise and the downfall, it was one of the things I enjoyed that last couple of years there.
Yeah. Well,
classic. That's what comes to mind. And when you think about when they won the title at Super Brawl, who they beat for it, Benoit and Malenko, kind of that, you think about where Windham and Curt came from, like we were just talking about. We digressed for 10 minutes talking about the AWA and the territories versus, those guys coming into it. And once again, we find that new school versus old school. These are the two new horsemen. How many times have we seen Curt Hennig and Flair, or Curt Hennig and Arn Anderson and now we see him against a totally new version of the horseman. You know what I mean? And once again, he's kind of bridging this new school and old school.
Who was a horseman.
Yeah. And now he's kind of that old school with the new school. You see what I mean? Like before he was the bridge where he was kind of the older of the young guys.
Yeah.
And now he's the youngest of the old guys.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And so we kind of start to see that bridge of his career come on the other tail end of it now. Not that 98 was the tail end of his career, but we're a year and a half away from him leaving the company at this point.
Yeah. We're not far. There's not many highlights left to his WCW career, but I remember the Super Brawl. I remember them winning the tag titles and how they did with tying the belt around, I believe it was Malenko, because it was weird because they had to have, it was like almost like a 2 out of 3 falls match or something because it was a bracket, but Malenko and Benoit had to win 2 falls to win because they had already sustained 1 loss, and I think it was like a two-pin elimination tournament, and Barry Windham and Curt hadn't. So all they had to do was win 1.
It was like a pull system without any scoring, a really bastardized G1 thing where you had to wrestle more than 1 match, but it wasn't one single elimination out of the tournament thing.
Yeah, they literally had a match. Benoit and Malenko won. There was like a 5-second rest period, and then here we go again.
Bingo.
But I think it was a shock because I think the fans and everything really expected Benoit and Malenko to take these home because they were red hot at the time. They had, even though they had been in the company for a while and doing different things, the build of them as the new horsemen to bring back the horsemen, bring Flair back into WCW, form this. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point. The night where Flair returns and the horsemen are all in suits. The arena is very dark. Flair's crying upon his return. Like that storyline built Malenko and Benoit so much because they were championing to bring back the horsemen. And I think the crowd really got behind them. So I think that when Curt and Barry won, I think that really shocked a lot of people. It shocked me in 1999 as a 14-year-old. But I love tag team wrestling and I love tournaments, so this was perfect for me. They hold the titles for only about a month, and then it's a strap match. But Benoit and Malenko take them off of it. So I mean, I don't know. If you're having a tournament to crown new champions, I don't necessarily want a quick turnover. Like I would have rather had it been 6 months than it over, but a month. That's just, I'm like, wow. It just almost seems a waste of the tournament.
Yeah.
So then we get into what a lot of people say is one of their favorite things in Curt Hennig's career, and that's Curt Hennig, Barry Windham, Kendall Windham, and Barry Duncombe Jr., aka the West Texas Rednecks. And they have a feud with none other than Master P and Conan and Ray Jr. and the classic Rap is Crap song. Tyler, take it away.
I mean, it is a classic, but I think the best part of that whole thing was going into that. Master P, Conan, and Ray were supposed to be the baby faces, but the crowd loved the West Texas Rednecks. Can't talk, and they really became faces in a way because they made people laugh. They could wrestle. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't my thing, I guess, but people liked them. People loved them.
Well,
Master P is to this point in WCW history what Ready to Rumble was in 2000. Like he was a publicity stunt, man. Eric Bischoff was like,
Definitely.
man, fuck it. Master P totally put butts in seats. This will get over. Fans love rap music. You know what fans love more than rap music? Like in 1998, people loved like that kind of silly, adjacent, bullshit, knockoff, laugh, funny nonsense. We're in the middle of the Attitude Era, man. Drinking beers, Stone Cold Steve Austin cracking beers. And on the other station, we've got a group of rednecks who are overtly playing into stereotypes, singing Rap is Crap. The fans loved it, thought it was hilarious. So they spent all this money to bring Master P in, who they thought would be the bigger star. And Curt Hennig ended up being more over in this bullshit gimmick than all the money they spent to get Master P in.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
you have to also remember, WCW is a Southern-based wrestling organization.
Wrestling with a capital R.
Yeah, like, of course, the West Texas Rednecks are gonna get over, especially because the majority of yes, they're touring all over the country, but the Southeast is their main home base, and they are there often. Of course, that group is going to get over.
Yep.
Well, after the West Texas Rednecks, Kurt's utilized as a resource. Again, good matches, no main features, no big storylines or anything. And then we get to September of 2000, and that's his end of his run in WCW. I know this is off topic of WCW, but when he returned at the Royal Rumble and as Mr. Perfect in WWF, I was shocked. And was like super surprised to see how featured he was. I mean, he was like one of the final four of it. Like, I remember thinking, are they going to give Curt Hennig a push at this age? Like, with Austin and Taker and you know, Triple H and everybody, like Angle, like it was just so, I don't know, out of left field, but in the best way.
That was 2002, right? No, 2001?
Yes.
No,
2002 is when he came out in the Rumble, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Who won in 02? Was that Triple H?
Yeah, from the quad injury.
Yep.
That's right.
So.
No, there was no way Hennig was winning that. Triple H coming back from the quad injury was the biggest pop I've ever heard in my life, dude.
I don't remember who the third one was, but it was him, Angle, and Triple H, and I forget who the other one was. But
Was it Lord Voldemort?
I don't think so.
Because his win was coming up. He won in what?
Whatever year WrestleMania 20 was.
05.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it was, I just remember just being like, you're really featuring Curt Hennig, Mr. Perfect in the year 2000, like 2001.
Good on you, kid. Good on you.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. It just felt right. And of course, you know, later Plane Ride from Hell, all that good stuff. But But yeah, so I mean, as many wrestlers did in WCW, he just kind of, disappeared. He just was gone, never to be heard or mentioned of again. And that happened to a lot of wrestlers in WCW. But oh boys, that's kind of a nutshell of Curt Hennig in WCW. We try to every episode. Sometimes it slips this host's mind to ask, but I always like to say, what's the good and the bad of every subject that we talk about? What's the good and the bad of Curt Hennig in WCW?
I guess I would say just the times he was featured are pretty memorable. Like when he turned on basically a bunch of people and the West Texas Rednecks, if you want to consider that good. But yeah, he definitely got lost in the shuffle. I mean, it was sad, honestly. And there's so many wrestlers that happened to during that era, and they're happening again today. But yeah, he definitely got lost.
I would easily say the best thing about Curt Hennig in any promotion he worked in was he was one of the best in-ring workers and one of the best hands the business ever seen. He could wrestle a broom and make it look good every time. The bad of him in WCW is also the bad of him being everywhere outside of Vern Gagne's AWA. He was never given that push to be the champion. He was never given a chance to be the face of your promotion and run with it. And I feel like that was the one thing that he should have gotten at some point. Your Dustin Rhodes, your Scott Halls, your Curt Hennigs. You know what I mean? Like, never got the big one.
So I mentioned at the top of the show that something that's never happened in one of our episodes happened by doing this episode and researching. I have said for a while, and I'm kind of like how you mentioned it, Will, the big ones, WCW Championship, WWF Championship. To me, it's Scott Hall, number one. Curt was probably number two in my list. Dustin Rhodes up there too. After just the research for WCW, I might take him off my list. Like, he just was. I in my mind, maybe I was looking through it with rose-colored glasses or whatever, but like going back and researching, it's like maybe in my mind, I feel like I remember so much more Curt Hennig in WCW and having bigger moments, but doing the research, it's not there. It's just not. Him in WWF with the run and the amazing matches for the IC title, yeah, should have won the big one there. WCW, no, there's no. But never have in the show when we researched the topic have I been like, wow, my mindset on a wrestler has now completely changed.
I can respect that.
Yeah.
Like,
me too.
And it breaks my heart a little bit because I'm a big Curt Hennig fan. Like, I was a big Mr. Perfect fan. But yeah, so that wraps Curt Hennig for this week's episode. Let's take care of the business part of everything. Tyler, where can we find you? What do you got going on? The floor is yours.
Mainly my main thing is TikTok, Tyler.Wrestles, as you can see on my thing. Tyler.Wrestles on Instagram. I have a Twitter, but no dot in the middle because they don't like punctuations. I also have a YouTube. I don't post on there very often, but it's Tyler.Wrestles. Everything's Tyler.Wrestles except for Twitter. So I post a lot of stuff on there. I try to talk about shows and make stuff up. And I don't know. I have a lot of fun.
You are one of my favorite people to see the content come out of TikTok. Like,
you never know what's going to happen.
I have slowed down so much in TikTok, like so much. But like there are times where I'm like, I'll be scrolling and it's like every few are you, and I'm like, he pumps out the content like I used to. Like, sometimes I'm like, it feels like sometimes I'm like, maybe it's not. He's posting them on the same day, but I swear I'm like, it's like you do 6 or 7 videos a day sometimes, and I'm like,
yeah, no, not always. Normally I try to. Well, I might do 2 or 3 a day, but
yeah. Like, and I'm just like, man, that's what I used to do. Oh, I miss sleep.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. Well, what's going on with Bot Spots and Share Shots and Rivet City Radio this week? Oh, by the way, big congratulations to Will for his 100th episode interview with his interview series and everything. Got to sit down and talk to also friend of ours, Michael Wayne from TikTok. Ruthless Michael Wayne. Shout out to him. I want to get him on the show one day too. But yeah, congratulations to that, buddy. And what you got coming up?
Interviews?
Yeah.
No.
It never stops.
I've got Twitch from the Monster Factory coming up from the Apple TV show with Danny Cage and those guys. He's one of his students, so I've got him coming up. I've got my first New Japan interview coming up with Barrett Brown. He's in a huge rivalry right now with Kerry Morton for the NWA Junior Heavyweight Championship. So he's all over Twitter right now. He's up there. The NWA is about to sign that guy. He's a rock solid superstar LA Dojo graduate. So I've got him coming up. Lots of cool stuff. Money in the Bank's right around the corner. Sunday for Botch Spots, I've got the unpinned CCW heavyweight champion Matt Blackwell coming on for a live episode out of Jacksonville. Tons of stuff. I work all the time. I love what I do.
I know you do. I'm just thankful that I get to share at least an hour of the week. Although we talk literally every single day.
We talk every day.
We really do. It's become like you mentioned it last week. Like if you haven't heard from me, you're like, you got to check on me. And I'm like, I feel like the same thing. I'm like, you all right?
I went 3 days without talking to you, and I immediately was like, is everything okay? Like the wife, the kids, the job, like where the fuck have you been?
Working. That's the answer. And sitting in traffic getting to said work since it's an hour away. But yeah, you guys can find me as always, DadHat Wrestling on pretty much everything: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Follow World Championship Wreckage. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe here. We are not far from. I mean, it's weird because we just did that. We just had that 50th, giveaway that we did, but we're not far from 100 now, which is crazy to me. I thought we might get 10 followers, and I'd call that a success. But here we are. We're getting closer to 100. So hit that like and subscribe. Will and I have something special planned for when we hit 100. Something we haven't done yet here with World Championship Wreckage, but that's for when we hit 100 followers or subscribers, I should say. But follow our Twitter, WC Wreckage Pod on Twitter, to vote each and every week on our next poll. Currently, it's got 4 more days up, but currently up there is either Starcade 83, which was my choice, versus Bret Hart in WCW, which was Will. And Will is winning, folks. Will is winning currently.
I'm going to get one, damn it. I'm going to get one.
Like I checked it literally, and this poll actually has the most votes, and it continues to get bigger than any poll that we've had so far, which is surprising that it's Bret Hart that's going to may take away the victory for you, Will. But as always, we got to throw 2 more things on the poll for after that one for the next week. So I went first last week. I'll let you go first this time.
My first poll that I suggested was the buyout of, all the territories and everything and the birth of WCW. My poll suggestion this week is the end of everything. And I want to do a watch along for the final Nitro where McMahon shows up where not the final Nitro, I guess, but the Nitro where McMahon shows up.
Yeah,
and he's
the final Nitro. No,
is that the final Nitro?
The final Nitro.
Yeah. So we talked about the beginning of WCW. Let's talk about the end of it and do a watch along of that last Nitro and talk about the final Nitro of WCW.
Okay, that's a good one. I'm all for doing watch alongs and everything. Yeah. Now I want to kind of pivot because we haven't done a watch along, and I want to throw out almost another watch along. But
they've got no choice but to let us watch wrestling.
yeah. Instead of just having to go through and research. Yeah. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna throw out, if you're gonna do a watch along, the last Nitro. Man, there's so many good choices. There's so many good options. I'm gonna throw one of my guilty pleasure pay-per-views for WCW. if you haven't learned already, 1998 is one of my favorite years in wrestling.
Because it's one of the greatest years in wrestling.
1998 is one of my favorites. Absolutely. I'm going to throw Slamboree 1998 in the poll. It's a great pay-per-view, and it has a killer cage match with DDP and Raven.
Yep.
So, all right. So either way, the next one after Brett or Starrcade 83, either way, it will be a watch along. So either we will have watched Slamboree 98 or the very last Nitro. So that'll be cool. That'll be something different that we get to do and talk about those. So sweet. So we've got that all together. But Tyler, thank you for coming on, man. I'm glad we finally got to have you on.
Yeah, I'm glad I finally made it.
We'll have to do this again. Will, I'm sure I'll talk to you tomorrow, as always.
We will.
I'm gonna go to bed because it's late, and I'm sure the little one will wake me up at some point here in the next couple of hours, and I have to work tomorrow. And then Thursday, I get to go buy AEW Fight Forever.
Fantastic.
Yep.
It just makes me excited because it looks and feels like old Nintendo 64 wrestling games, and it makes me so happy, so happy. But folks, as we end every episode, if I can find it, wise words from the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, baby, I got one more thing to say. Your gas tank is full. Your dipstick is in. Your windows washed. Y'all come back and see me again.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
See ya.